Hello, Hastings families. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's webinar. We're going to go over our hybrid protocols, and our hope is that after tonight, you feel like you have a good understanding of how school will run for your children and how we intend to keep them safe and keep them learning during hybrid. So my name's Mike Robertson. I'm the principal here at Hastings Middle School. I'm also joined by our assistant principal, Miss Lippert, and our school nurse, Elisa Flege, is here to cover some of the topics around health and safety for hybrid. Let me get my, there you go. So this slide here, this link will be shared out. Has already been shared out. And there are some hyperlinks to some documents here that are helpful. You've got the responsible restart safety presentation for the district. That's kind of like the mother document of all of our safety stuff. So everything you're seeing in this Hastings document is based upon our district responsible restart safety presentation. And that has been created in partnership with Franklin County Public Health. And has been looked over by them a number of times to make sure it addresses all the needs. And there's some other links in here that we'll go over as we go through. So agenda for tonight is to start our presentation and go through that. It should take about a half an hour to 45 minutes. And then after that, we'll answer questions that are put in the question and answer for those of you on Zoom. That question and answer feature is there. On YouTube, it is not if you're viewing it there. Please give us some time though to start, before you start typing questions into that Q&A feature, because our presentation may address some of the things that you might be thinking about asking. Type your questions into there in Zoom, and we will answer as many questions as we can as time permits, but know that we will also download the whole Q&A and make sure that any questions we weren't able to get to are addressed when we send out our family flyer on Friday or Sunday. So big picture with hybrid is we want to make sure kids are safe. We want to make sure our adults are safe. And we want to make sure that people can focus on their learning and enjoy their time in the building. And so everything that you're about to see when it comes to safety and the well-being of our students and our adults really comes out of these 5 things: that we want to wear masks as much as possible. We want to physically distance more than 6 feet as much as possible. We want to avoid what's considered close contact by Franklin County Public Health, which is that you want to never be, or you want to avoid being less than 6 feet, even if you are both masked for more than 15 minutes. Now, we're never going to get close to that 15-minute threshold between kids, but we really want to avoid that close contact that Franklin County has defined. We want to either disinfect or let something sit for 72 hours before it's shared. And we also want to make sure we can keep records for our contact tracing. So those 5 things are really what inform the rest of the protocols that you're about to see. So we're going to start by bringing up Ms. Lippert to talk about our transition week.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Megan Lippert, and I'm the assistant principal here at Hastings Middle School. We are so glad to have you with us. We know that many of you have questions and have been highly anticipating tonight's presentation. So hopefully we are able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. So the first thing that we're going to go over is what next week is going to look like. And so as you can tell from this slide, Monday and Tuesday are going to be our normal enhanced distance learning days. So your children will follow their normal schedule Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, we are going to start remote learning, which is basically independent, self-paced work that has been assigned by your child's classroom teachers. So there will be no advisory, no scheduled periods 1 through 4, no scheduled Zooms. Teachers are going to, again, be making the final preparations for the in-person learning during those days. So there will be no Zoom requirements for your children Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. Thursday and Friday are going to be our 6th grade student and new student transition days. So as you can see, group 1, 6th graders, new 7th and 8th graders, so new to the district, 7th and 8th graders, and then any student who receives specially designed instruction through an IEP in group 1 will also be invited into the building. Every other student at Hastings Middle School will be participating in remote learning. And then on Friday will be group 2. So group 2 6th graders, group 2 new to the district 7th and 8th graders, and then group 2 students on IEPs. And then here's just a pretty graphic of what those 2 days look like. One request that we do have, if you're able, if you have a child who receives special education services through an IEP, you certainly do not have to do this, but it would be helpful if we knew who was coming those days or with their group rather. So if you could have your child or somebody from your family communicate with your child's intervention specialist just to give us a heads up. Again, not required, but it would be very helpful.
Yeah, so now we want to bring in our nurse, Lisa Flege, who can take us through some of our mask procedures, the role of the nurse, and then also go over how we're treating symptoms during hybrid.
Good evening, everyone. Like Mike said, my name is Lisa Flege, and I am your school nurse. This first of a few slides I'll go over is just an important comment for everyone to be aware of. We are changing our role as a directive through the health department that we do need to focus on keeping the sick children at home and making sure the disease doesn't spread in our building rather than trying to keep kids at school. Now, we do know that we want everyone to be in school, but in order for everyone to be in school, they have to be well. So it's going to look a little different this year as far as my role, but just to understand we're all in this together, and I really look forward to meeting our new 6th graders, our new 7th and 8th graders, and then helping the 7th and 8th graders that I already know from last year have a great year this year. So just to go over a couple of things, I have my contact information in here. I usually do post things in the not Friday flyer, the weekly flyer, I guess we call it now, or family flyer, I guess we call it, sorry. So please access that if you need to look for any information of what's coming out from my office. Okay, if anyone has any questions or if your child has any symptoms, I do encourage you to go ahead and let me know so I can help walk through that with you and we can kind of decide if that's an appropriate situation. I don't have the answer, I will find it for you. We do want to make sure that you're monitoring at home before the children come to school and looking for the COVID symptoms. The resource links that we gave you will go over those if you have any questions about that. Again, sometimes those information changes, so we will keep you updated if anything does. We're going to continue to follow our public guidelines as far as excluding students and staff, and then letting everyone know when they're capable of return. And this is, again, something that the district did not come up with. This is public health directives. So we want to make sure that parents are communicating directly to the school regarding your student being ill. So if they're feeling unwell in class, please, please, please don't text back and forth with the student with them in class. They need to let the teacher know. I will perform an assessment and then let you know what's going on, and together we'll decide if it's a situation where the student has to go home or if they're okay to stay. We will also in the building continue helping them with contact tracing. So that means just within the surroundings of the school and athletics, I will help decide who, if someone becomes positive within the last 48 hours, became a close contact. So within that 6 feet in 15 minutes. So that will be something that I will be helping with and working together with our representative from the health department. So as far as immunizations, there aren't any changes in the requirements. So in order to stay healthy and avoid another outbreak, I still have some immunization records that are due for this year. So please make sure you get those to me. And students who have chronic conditions, I want to make sure and let everyone know we still need to manage those to keep those folks healthy. We'll have two different setups as far as the health clinic for students who are well and having regular visits for medications and that sort of thing, regular care. And then we'll also have a separate room where students will be waiting for pickup when they are ill. So there will be no risk of cross-contamination. And it looks like we jumped ahead to masks. Did I miss a point? Yeah, so and then just the illness tracking. And again, that's more of the same thing, just making sure we know who is absent for what reason and when they can come back safely. As far as the masks, obviously everyone needs to wear a mask. We want to make sure that everyone understands it has to cover the nose, the mouth, and the chin. And we want it to be snug. Sometimes when there's gaps and if there's an exhalation valve, that sort of thing, there's too much air exchange going on. So we do want to make sure that there's at least 2 layers of fabric covering all those areas. We expect the students to come to school with that mask. And if for some reason they don't have one that is appropriate for school, meaning that if it says or looks like something that won't work, we will have a backup for them. Again, we want to make sure students are practicing using the ear loops, or if they tie in the back, we want to make sure they're not touching the front part of their mask. This is considered the dirty part. If they do have to make an adjustment here, try to have them at home practice either washing their hands or using their hand sanitizer, because this is considered the dirty part. So if you need to make adjustments, as we all do, try to just stick with the edge of the mask. And likewise, if we're taking it on and putting it off, we do ask that students bring either a paper bag or a Ziploc to store the mask in so that it stays contained while they're having their lunch, and then they can grab it by the loops and put it back on. We do want to make sure, according to the CDC guidelines, they have asked that students, if you know you're going to cough or sneeze, to try to have tissues handy, try to remove your mask, use your hands to cough or sneeze into the tissue as a barrier. Dispose of that properly, use your hand sanitizer or wash your hands as your mask goes back on. This keeps your mask from being soiled, and soiled masks, we know, are harder to breathe through. They also don't offer the same level of protection. And likewise, if you're coughing and sneezing through, especially a cloth mask, that's very porous. So there's more likely for more airflow to go through that way than there would be if you're just normally breathing. So that's why we're using that. And again, some of these guidelines change. So if so, we will let you know about that. We will try to make sure that there are plenty of tissues around the classrooms for your students. They can also, alternatively, if it sneaks up on them quickly, just like we always did, do it in your elbow, okay? We recommend everyone bring at least one spare mask, because as we know, sometimes things happen and you might want to switch that out during the day, and that they're appropriately laundered at the end of the day. Like I said, we have extra masks available if someone is in a situation that they need it. As far as symptom checking, again, I already spoke to this. So if anyone has any questions about that, again, let me know. Let's see. There's the Hastings attendance email, so you're welcome to call. We do, again, ask that you report what symptoms your student is having, so that you may get a call from me shortly thereafter, toward mid-morning, early afternoon, to kind of determine how your student is doing and if there needs to be any follow-up as far as that goes. The health department has asked that we do that, so I will stay in touch with you. This is a picture, again, one of the links that we sent you. This is just the graphic of the algorithm that we'll be using to determine if a situation where a student has to be excluded for a period of time. Most symptoms, if they are not due to another cause, meaning allergies, asthma, some type of an underlying condition, then the student will need to stay home and do distance learning for 10 days, because students that in this age group oftentimes are asymptomatic, or they may have very little symptoms. We don't know if they're contagious. So again, if you decide to pursue testing, or if you talk to your doctor and they give you a note to say that it's okay to come back to school because of a pre-existing condition, then that's perfectly fine. So that's basically what this shows. As far as missing school, again, it's more important that the student stay home and get well. If there is any question, they do have a way to continue their learning and will not be counting against them to not be in the classroom. Again, normal sick day protocols. So if there is any work that they feel that they need to make up, we will be very accommodating with that as well. The students will have Canvas assignments available and lesson materials. So we don't want anyone to fall behind. There may be situations where your child isn't ill, but maybe was exposed to someone and has to be home for 14 days. That will happen. And so we just all need to kind of roll with it. So we definitely want to make sure everyone stays up on their work as much as possible. So teachers are expecting that and will be able to work with you. And students may obviously always email their teachers and ask questions while they're out, so that there's a dialogue back and forth about their assignments.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We really appreciate it. Now, Ms. Lippert's going to go over office protocols for coming into the building.
Yeah, so much like a lot of things that are going on in the building, office visits and signing students in and out are going to need to look very different this year. So physically entering the building for family members will only include when you are signing a student out for an appointment in the main office. Or if you have a prearranged meeting. Unfortunately, due to the size of our office, we're not able to accommodate unannounced meetings, because if a teacher or a counselor or an administrator doesn't know you're coming, sometimes it takes a lot of time to get them down to the office, and we just don't unfortunately have the availability to do that this year. So we are asking that unless you have a prearranged meeting with somebody, or that you are signing your student out, we will not be buzzing anybody into the main office. When you do enter the building, we are going to have hand sanitizer out in our vestibule area. So you will need to sanitize your hands prior to entering the building. And we are also requiring everybody who enters the building to be wearing a mask and appropriately covering your face the way that Nurse Flagey just explained. So nobody will be allowed in the building without a proper mask, and we will have masks available if you need to. We are also asking that we limit the items that we drop off to our students this year. So we are asking first and foremost that you, if possible, to label whatever you're dropping off. But we are asking you to limit drop-off items to technology, whether that's a cell phone or an iPad, headphones, something that they're absolutely going to need that day. And you can also certainly drop off lunch if they forget it at home. But what that will look like is you will buzz in, let Miss Hample at our front desk know that you are dropping off an item, and you will leave it on a table in that vestibule area. And she will come out as soon as everybody is gone, and she will grab it and make sure that your student gets their item. When you are signing students out, we ask that you prioritize your appointments on the remote days. So when your children are in the building, we ask that you try to prioritize appointments for the other days. We understand that there are a lot of situations in which you can't control what days your child has a dentist appointment or a doctor's appointment, but we just ask that you prioritize the remote days. Again, due to small office space, we are going to ask that once you sign your student out, that you wait outside of the building for your child to come down. You can also obviously wait in your vehicle. If it's raining or snowing, you can certainly wait inside. But again, just to limit the number of people within the office space. And then when you are dropping your student off in the morning, I apologize, the slide is incorrect. When you are dropping students off in the morning, you do not need to come in as you have had in the past. Feel free to just drop your student off. They will enter the building through the front doors by buzzing in, sanitizing, masking themselves. And then we just ask that you call or email the attendance office, and Miss Fissel, our attendance secretary, will make sure that the teacher knows that your student has entered the building.
Thank you, Ms. Lippert. So this is the arrival protocols that like all the students will use when they come to school. That includes in our transition days. So this is how you get into the school building. So between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, our buses will still be dropping off at the normal time. Buses will drop off along Hastings Lane just as they have before, and the car loop will go through the parking lot just as it has before. Students can still bike, walk, or skateboard to school. Just remember that if you're biking or skateboarding, that we walk those things when we get onto school property. That's to avoid people riding on their bikes or skateboards through the traffic in our parking lot, just trying to keep people safe. We'll still have our bike racks and all that sort of thing. All students enter the building through the doors nearest the parking lot. I'm not going to read this because there's a map on the next slide that actually shows it a lot clearer, but that is how those two exits are described. So there's a door for our bus folks, and then there's a door for bikers, walkers, and our car riders. We encourage walkers, bikers, and car riders to arrive as close to 8 o'clock as possible. That just makes it easier for us to safely keep people distanced within the building before they're able to go to their advisory. Students who arrive after 8:10 because they're tardy or they're returning from an appointment, and again, as Ms. Lippert said, we would love if you were able to prioritize remote learning days rather than in-person days for those appointments. But if there is an appointment, we understand that. And if they're coming into the building after 8:10, they have to go through the main office. This is that map I was talking about. If you can see Hastings Lane and the bus drop-off area there at the bottom, the parking lot. So bus riders are going into exit or door 3, and car riders and bikers, walkers will go in through door 4. Upon entering the building, students will be escorted to a 6-foot physical distance place in the hallway to stand or sit until 8 o'clock. So we've marked off those spaces with a red dot. They just walk to the next free red dot and they wait there until 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, students will be released to go to their advisory. Students will not be able to use a locker, so they'll keep their materials, which includes potentially their coat later on, backpack, and their lunch with them during the day, which includes transition between classrooms. Students who ride skateboards or scooters, things that can't be chained up, will be stored in an athletic director's office, but do try to, if you're going to bring a skateboard or a scooter, figuring out a way to store those outside at our bike rack is preferred. And then students who have athletic equipment, we will have a protocol for dropping that off in the locker rooms near the gym prior to 8:10. The next, we're going to go over what the hybrid schedule is. This has been out for a while, but we know it's a little confusing. If you're anything like me, for my own kids, when they were going to Worthington schools, I tuned in about a day before and then figured it out from there. So if this is your first time seeing the hybrid schedule, that is okay. The first thing we want to do is distinguish between in-school days and remote learning days. So we're on a 3-2-2-3 model. So some weeks your child will be in school for 3 days and remote learning for 2, and some days it'll flip 2 and 3, and that Wednesday is that flip day. So on days students are in school, they'll be following a set schedule and attend in-person classes. When students are at home, they'll be remote learning. Remote learning is independent learning facilitated by accessing materials and activities in Canvas. So there is no live interaction during remote learning days. They log in and do practice activities in Canvas, and those activities were set up on the days that they were in person. Assignments for remote learning will be introduced by the teacher during face-to-face, that's kind of what I just said, and completed independently. Teacher may assign up to an hour of work per week per class outside of in-person classes for remote learning. So that one is a little confusing. So that means that for the 8 classes that your child is in, they will get assigned 1 hour of work to do on those remote learning days. A good way to think about this is they'll actually end up with an hour of work for each of their classes. So if they follow their current enhanced distance learning bell schedule on the days that they are at home, that has them going through 8 of their classes, and it's 1 hour apiece. So that's a great way to break up their work So they can do their 1 hour of math, they can do their 1 hour of language arts, their 1 hour of science and social studies, their 1 hour of music, and so on. So each of those classes will be able to assign up to 1 hour of work for them to complete when they are at home. And also just to note that high school credited courses for students who are in, like, say, algebra, honors geometry, honors physical science, or their novice level of a global language can be assigned up to 1.5 hours per week. That's consistent with the high school. The hybrid schedule overview. So again, group 1 is that A through K group, and group 2 is that L through Z group. That's how we divided our school in half. And we know that some families have switched those groups based on requests. So we call them group 1 and group 2, just so you know it counts for those. So on Monday and Tuesday, group 1 will be in person, and group 2 will be in remote learning. They'll have periods 1 through 4 on Monday, and on Tuesday, they'll have periods 5 through 8. Group 2 is in person on Thursday and Friday. On Thursday, they will have periods 1 through 4, and on Friday, they'll have periods 5 through 8, and group 1 will be remote learning. And Wednesday is that flip day. Every other week will be group 1 or group 2 in person, and it alternates periods. And there's a link to the entire rest of the year at the beginning of this presentation where you can see what each of those Wednesdays are, so you can plan ahead. And that same calendar has been out on our district website, just so you can plan ahead for transportation or childcare, those sort of things. The bell schedule looks like this. We have reduced transitions in our day. That's why we're going through just 4 periods, and they are longer. So they're 80-minute instructional periods. Students will start in their advisory at the beginning of the day for 15 minutes, just to sort of orient themselves, do some checking of Power School, get some getting to know you activities, and then go through their 4 classes. There is a 70-minute lunch block, which is broken up into halves, and we'll go over that a little later, what lunch looks like. So on any day, they'll either go to periods 1, 2, 3, or 4, or periods 5, 6, 7, and 8. So now transitioning between classes, Ms. Libert's going to tell you how kids will get from class to class safely and with physical distancing.
So this is certainly an area that we have spent a lot of time on. As we've said before, we want to make sure that students and staff are able to remain safe when in the building. So when students are transitioning between classes, every hallway will be a one-way hallway. And during classes themselves, they won't be one ways, but when we are transitioning from class to class, every hallway will be a one-way hallway. And I'll show you in the next slide what those hallways are going to look like. Teachers will be standing at classroom doors, just monitoring social distancing, students wearing masks, obviously saying hello, but just making sure that our students are staying safe. And when students are exiting their classrooms, they will be released from class one at a time and asked to just physically distance while they are transitioning. Because of the close contact being 15 minutes or less, the duration of the class change with it being 5 minutes that means that the transitions don't fall under that close contact designation. So we are confident that our students will be able to remain safe as long as they are masked during transitions. Another thing, just so that we can make sure that we can monitor our contact tracing, is that students will not be allowed to use the restroom during this 5-minute break. Teachers will be building in not group or class restroom breaks, but they do know that students are going to need to use the restroom, especially because our classes are 80 minutes long. So they will not be missing instruction if they have to use the restroom, but students will not be allowed to use the restroom during the class transitions. So as you can see here, at the top left, that's our second floor, and the bottom right is our first floor. Again, these one-way hallways will only be during class changes. So if a student has to use the restroom and they're in room 101, they don't have to go all the way around the building again to use the restroom. We just, again, have to limit the number of students in the hallways and in the restrooms at that time.
This is still you, Ms. Lippert?
Yes.
All right, we need the next slide. Classrooms doesn't tell you a whole lot.
Thank you. Yeah, we have classrooms. As I just mentioned, one of the important parts of our job this year is going to be the contact tracing. We have to be able to report to the Franklin County Health Department should they communicate with us if somebody were to contract COVID, who has been in close contact with that student or that staff member. And so one of the only ways that we're going to be able to do this is wherever that student is throughout the day, there will have to be some type of assigned seating. Our teachers are aware that they are going to have to keep documentation of where students sit within the classroom on a daily basis. Our students who receive small group testing, intervention specialists, and our educational aides are going to have to keep documentation of where students sit when they go to their small group testing. So every classroom will have assigned seats for each student, and the only person that can change those seats is that classroom teacher. And again, that is to minimize the contact. And then, oh, you're fine, you can keep going. We have been spending hours upon hours, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, making sure that our classrooms are ready for our students and our staff. And so some of the things that we have done to make sure that our classrooms are a safe space for students and staff is that every classroom has student desks or student tables, and every single student desk or table is 6 feet apart for that physical distancing piece. Students, for the most part, are going to remain in their seats and masked during class times. Teachers do have the option of allowing students mask breaks or desk breaks, but only when it's safe to do so. So our current guidance is a couple breaths. We also have a lot of teachers who are very interested in spending some educational time outside as well, which will hopefully allow for longer periods of time without masks. And then as far as the physical classroom, inside classroom goes, every classroom has a designated teacher area. And so that teacher area occupies 6 feet from the front of the wall to the front of the teacher desk, or the front of the first student desk, I apologize. And it runs the whole length of that classroom. So we will have some teachers who will monitor students only from that area, just based on their level of comfort. But we will also have teachers, who will monitor the classroom as they typically have through rotating through the room. Teachers are allowed to rotate through the room. Again, our current guidance is 6 feet, both masked for less than 15 minutes. And so our guidance to our staff has been 15 minutes cumulatively. So a teacher will be able to be within 6 feet of our students, no more than 15 minutes per period. So that's the guidance that we've given them. And then as far as sanitizing the classrooms go, again, we've spent a lot of time talking with our staff about proper sanitation. So we have a sanitizing block of time built into every class period. So the last 5 minutes of every class period will be designated to sanitizing the student desks and high touch areas in that room. So at that time, students are going to get out of their seats. They will stand physically distanced, of course. And then the teacher or a trained or designated student or other staff member will sanitize each student desk. That includes the work surface, the seat, if the chair or the desk has any arms on it. So any high touch areas on that student desk. In order to sanitize the desk, whoever's sanitizing must wear gloves. We have district approved sanitizing spray that must be used on disposable paper towels only. They'll use that to wipe down the furniture and then obviously dispose of the gloves and the paper towels. It's my understanding that most of our teachers will be doing this sanitizing. If you have any concerns about your child being forced to sanitize desks, please do not hesitate to reach out to your child's teacher or Mr. Robertson or myself, and we can certainly have a conversation about that. Shared materials is obviously a big one too. You know, a lot of in our former lives, you know, we shared pencils and pens and erasers and markers and tools, and unfortunately that world has changed a lot. So when appropriate, students will have their own supplies and they will be stored separately whenever possible. So this will look differently, again, based on what class your student is in. And our teachers are ready to communicate what that's going to look like in each of their classrooms, whether they're taking art or tech ed, if they're in language arts, and you know, there's a need to potentially share books. But the guidance that we've been given and what we have told our staff is that all shared materials or equipment needs to be disinfected in between student use. So not just class to class, but if multiple students need to use a chisel or something for art class, it needs to be sanitized in between. Or if it's a material that we're not able to sanitize or disinfect, it has to be stored for 72 hours or more in between student uses. So an example of that would be if a student gets loaned a classroom book or a classroom novel, that book has to then be stored separately for 72 hours before the next student can use the book.
Restrooms and water. I just wanted to kind of give you a picture of what this looks like in the building. So we have a process that we use that students have used in years past too, to scan out of the room using their iPad. They scan a QR code. So they ask permission to use the restroom. When they're granted permission, they scan out. Every classroom has a designated restroom that the students have to use from that classroom, and that's to help with tracking how many students are out at the restroom at any one time, because we have to limit the number of students in the restroom to make sure physical distancing is possible. So just tallies it, and then when they sign back in, it comes off. So then the teachers can monitor centrally how many students are out to a given restroom and make sure that they're spacing out those visits. Students who need to use one of our private restrooms are still able to do so. We have a designated private restroom near our tech ed classroom that's a single stall, and students are still able to use that. They still scan out, but they go to that single stall private restroom and then come back, and that's fine. Students should take the most direct route to and from the restroom and remain masked at all times, even when in the restroom. And that goes back to something Ms. Lippert said. When we transition from class to class, we use those one-way hallways. But when a student is signing out during class, they are able to take the most direct route to and from. And students must wash their hands with soap for 20 seconds after using the restroom. Surprisingly enough, that hasn't changed in the era of COVID. That was still what we wanted them to do years ago, but it's even more important nowadays. Water, students should bring a bottle for water at school. Our water fountains will be turned off, but our water bottle filling stations will still be available. We will have disposable water bottles available when they're needed. And again, to make those transitions really efficient, students are not permitted to refill their water bottles during transition. They'll have to sign out from their room with their teacher's permission, go and fill up their water bottle. And then they, again, don't have to do the one-way hallway in class. They can always take the most direct route to and from a water filling station. That one-way hallway is just for those transitions from class to class. We're going to go over procedures for lunch with Ms. Lippert.
So lunch is, again, going to look very different this year, as are most things. So our lunch period, our class periods are 80 minutes, but our lunch period is going to be 70. Students will eat one half of the period, and then the other half of the period will include some type of recreational activity. So whether that's walking on the track, we are still working on what those logistics are going to look like as far as who goes when. But some students will eat first, just like we have in the past where they've eaten and then gone to intramurals. And some students will go to intramurals and then eat lunch. But we are asking right now that students again remain 6 feet apart and masked if they're going to be around one another, but there will be opportunities for them to take their masks off as long as they are outside and more than 6 feet. Students again will eat lunch in their second and sixth period class, depending on the schedule for the day. So we are doing our best to stick to the second period and sixth period. There may be a handful of students who have to transition to a different room just based on classroom capacity or some of our smaller classrooms because teachers will be switching out who's monitoring who. So again, for contact tracing, it's best to stay with the same students. And we also want to limit the transitions. So students will be eating in the classrooms. If a student has a peanut or a tree nut allergy, and they are, the entire classroom will need to be allergen free. So we will be sending letters home if your child is assigned to a room that has a student with a peanut or a tree nut allergy with some more guidance on what you can and can't pack. But students are able to pack or buy their lunch, and more information will come out from food services on what that looks like. So just kind of like what I was just saying, students who are buying a school lunch will need to pre-order. Unfortunately, we will not be able to do what we've done in the past where we've done a la carte. It will kind of be like a full meal or nothing. And again, more information will come out from food services. Should you forget to pack a lunch or pre-order, there will be extra lunches available. So it's, we're not going to not feed a student if you forget. So there will be extras, but the choices will certainly be limited. Lunches are going to be delivered to the rooms. So if you have a child who packs, they will carry that lunch with them throughout the day. But if they purchase a lunch, that will be delivered to their classroom where they will eat. We will have paper disposable liners that they will put under their lunch. Again, just to limit the potential for allergens or any other type of germs during this time. But students will eat at their desks, again, in an assigned seat, and they will be able to take their masks off when they eat their lunch. Trash will be handled by room and will be picked up by the custodians and removed as soon as everybody is done. And then desks will be sanitized again in a similar process to what we do after an academic class. And as per always, we're going to ask that nobody is sharing food, just again, in case of any type of transmitting of germs.
Thank you, Ms. Lippert. So we're going to go over schoolwork and grading. Just a couple things to remind you about that. All assignments and course materials will be posted to Canvas. Obviously, during face-to-face, there'll be some things that are done just strictly within the face-to-face classroom. But if it's something that a child needs to access outside of the classroom, whether it's for homework or something that needed to get finished up, all that stuff will be in Canvas, our one learning management system this year. Due dates in the Canvas calendar indicate when the assignment is due or when the assessment is occurring. So if you go into the calendar, that's a great place to see what's coming up. But remember, that's not the day that they should be working on it. It's the day that the assignment is due. And so students can check for due dates in their Canvas calendar, then kind of plan back the work they have to do. Students may be assigned, as I've already said, an hour of work outside of class for the week per class. So that's just reiterating that they'll have about a total of 8 hours, give or take, to complete over the course of the entire time that they are not in person. So that's not each day 8 hours of work. It's when they are home during remote learning, it'll be a total of an hour's work per class per week. We will follow our normal grading procedures for quarter and year-long grade cards. So there's no pass incomplete option this year. We are following our standard grading procedures. And this is a question we get a lot. How will we get through a year's worth of learning? So we understand that touch points with teachers in this face-to-face model are going to be less, but there are some things that we are doing and some things to keep in mind too from your own school experiences when you were there that If you were to spend 45 minutes within a classroom, you would be, getting direct instruction for a short portion of that time. You might be working in a group, depending upon when you went to school. I know I didn't do a ton of group work when I went to school, but if you're younger than me, maybe you did. And then there'd be some time maybe to get started on your homework. And even in some classes, this never happens at Hastings, but there might be that end of the 5 minutes where people are just waiting for the bell to ring. But the point is, what we're going to try to do is maximize our face-to-face time with students. We have 80 minutes in a class period. So that's almost twice the length of a normal class period. And remember, that's going to be in smaller class sizes. So we're going to leverage those smaller class sizes to increase engagement and feedback. If you remember being one of 24 in a classroom, there might be days where hopefully, it didn't happen too much to you in the school you went to, where an adult might only talk to you once. And it might have been easier to sort of coast along. But remember, in a smaller group environment, teacher engagement with the student and their ability to monitor and give feedback is going to be really increased from a normal class period. So by leveraging that and maximizing our time face-to-face and pushing sort of practice activities completely out of those lessons, we're going to be able to get through a lot of material, even though the face-to-face time is a little less. We're also prioritizing our outcomes for students to make sure we're hitting those key topics. And again, like I said, pushing practice activities outside of the classroom as much as possible, so that when students are in class, they're engaging in smaller groups with their teacher, getting more rapid cycle feedback on the work they're doing and showing what they know. So that's how we're going to get through a year's worth of learning in this model. One last thing, and then we'll get to our questions. So end of the day procedures, buses will still pick up along Hastings Lane and Reed Road. Car pickup will still be in the loop at the parking lot. Students will be dismissed from their last period class one at a time by a teacher. That's sort of like if you watched a wedding procession, you let the one go and then you kind of count to 4 and then you let the next one go. This is just to make sure that everyone doesn't rush out into the hallway at once, and that we can maintain physical distancing as students take the most direct route out of the building and then to where they're going to get picked up. My wife happens to be an administrator in a district that has been in session in a hybrid model, and she'll tell you that it's amazing what a building looks like with half the students. We normally have 720 students, give or take, in the before times. But in these hybrid days, we will only have 300 students in the building. So it will be really easy to physically distance within the hallway during when we dismiss. Students will practice physical distancing until they get, while they're on the school property, and they'll keep their masks on while they're on the school property until they're off of school property or until they're safely in their car. And bus riders must wear masks until they're off the bus. So that's all the information we wanted to go through today. We do have people who've participated in our Q&A, and we have our school counselors actually helping us curate those questions. So we're going to start going through those. And I love the first question that's here. Our goal tonight was to put people's minds at ease, to let you know that we have been paying careful attention to what Franklin County Public Health has been saying, that we have worked very hard to make sure that this is a safe environment for your child to come to. We want parents' minds to be at ease. But this first question really captures the other side of that coin, and I think it's really important. So will there be steps in place to provide safe socialization? And this is the really important part. I want my child to be safe, but not anxious. And we had a couple other statements like this that, we want to put things in perspective. And I couldn't agree with that statement more. We've taken all these precautions so that when your child walks through the door, yes, there are going to be some routines that are different. There are going to be some things we do to make sure that people stay safe. But we want this to be a relaxed environment as much as possible. We want students to participate in keeping everybody else safe, but not feel scared, not feel anxious, and know that they're here to learn, to be around other people, to learn in a collective environment, and to enjoy their time at school. And we think that once we get through teaching these routines and building up those good protocols, that we're going to be able to create an environment that is still relaxed and is something that students can really enjoy being a part of. And we really hope too that in those smaller classes that they're going to really get a lot from engaging with their teachers face-to-face in those smaller groups. So I couldn't agree with that more. We hope that every adult, and we know every adult here in the building, is going to be projecting calm and saying that you are safe here and that this is a place that you can learn and be relaxed. So thank you for that question. Our next question is for our nurse. In regards to the slide instructing students to take off their masks and sneeze or cough into a tissue, coughing and sneezing is a highly aerosoling event for spreading COVID. Does this increase the risk of COVID spread to everyone in the room? I know, Lisa, you mentioned, you kind of addressed this before, but if you wouldn't mind going over that again.
Absolutely. And I could talk about this for the whole hour, just all the different aspects of what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah,
And
Lisa knows how to have a good time.
like I mentioned, things do change. So if anything changes about this, but the research that is out right now has shown us that we need a cloth mask only when we're in a school environment. So with that being said, it's easier to breathe through and easier to wear throughout the day, more comfortable. However, if you are coughing or sneezing through that, it's more likely to have something come out. As you may be aware, there are different levels of masks. So like a surgical mask is like a paper, usually they're light blue kind of masks that they wear in the hospital. Those are a higher grade. And so certainly those stop more particles. And likewise, if you heard of like an N95 mask, that's a really heavy duty. So 95% of the particles are blocked, and those have to be specially fit tested. Those are only for the healthcare providers. So it is determined by the CDC that it's okay to wear the cloth mask. But with that in mind, in order to keep ourselves safe, we still have to go with using the elbow as barrier, or better yet, a tissue that you block with your hands. Put away the tissue, clean your hands, and you're good to go with your current mask.
Thank you,
that
Lisa.
answers the question.
It does. You also kind of touched on this, but this next one's also for you. So can students use the blue disposable surgical masks?
Absolutely. So that's something that if your family is able to provide that, that's certainly perfect. If you do have a cloth mask that is only a single layer, we just ask that you double it up and try to find a way to, either with pins or something like that, so that we have double layers. They're speaking now about the gator style being a kind that may not be sufficient for protecting the student and the people around them. So we are just asking that you use a cloth type mask. So a surgical mask is one step above that. So if you can provide that, absolutely.
Thank you so much. This next one's about the hybrid schedule. We get this question a lot. Could teachers use Zoom in their classroom so that the kids working at home could remote into the classroom with kids attending in person? That would prevent teachers from having to teach the same lesson twice and keep instructional time similar to the time students are with teachers now. This is a great question. And there are a couple of things that make this model difficult to do across our entire building. One of the first ones that come to mind is bandwidth and our technology within the classroom to be able to adequately broadcast our classrooms home and have students participate equally. And I've had some experience in this in a previous position. I was part of coordinating a remote learning, kind of a blended remote learning class for a Japanese program where students Zoomed in from another location in their own building to sit with a Japanese teacher teaching in-person students. And the logistics of that are actually kind of sneaky more complicated than you would think. But the other issue is broadcasting our in-person classes with other students in the room into homes, into the homes of other families. And so when we have students kind of in the classroom setting, that is a slightly more private setting than everyone Zooming in from their own individual homes where they have control over their videos. Teachers are certainly not precluded from Zooming with students during this time, but we want teachers focusing on the students that are in front of them to maximize that face-to-face time, maximize that engagement with students to make sure that the experience is consistent when they are in the class and the experience is consistent when they're out. So that's the answer to that question. The next one is also about the hybrid schedule. Will students be able to be carrying their instruments all day, or will they be able to drop them off in the band and orchestra classroom? Yes, they can drop off their instruments and their orchestra band teachers will go over how to do that safely. This next one's also for me. Will remote learning be assigned on a daily or weekly basis? Will students have to access all the assignments for the entire remote learning period each week before they leave school? So in general, the model will be the teacher will be setting up that assignment for the student in a face-to-face model, because we want those assignments that are done outside of school to largely be practice and things they can reliably do independently. So in general, they'll end sort of their time with the teacher face-to-face and say, okay, and this is what we're doing when we are home in remote learning. Those due dates will be in the Canvas calendar, and they will have time after their face-to-face, ample time given the due date they have to then, when they are at home, complete those activities. But as to whether or not, they won't necessarily all be out at the beginning of the week. They'll be assigned and made available in Canvas based upon the timing of each lesson. This next one's for Megan. Can students be picked up to go home for lunch?
So we would really appreciate if families did not pick up their students to leave the building to go to lunch. And the only reason that we prefer that is because everybody has lunch at the same time now, whether they eat first or second, but everybody eats within that 80-minute block or that 70-minute block. And so I worry about the number of people coming in, since you do have to physically come in to sign your student out. I worry about the number of people in the office. I worry that it will take a lot of time, and then in turn, if your lunch runs late, or students are then now coming back to the school building late. I also worry about the potential for somebody not being masked or not sanitizing properly while they're out of the building. So certainly we can't tell you no, but we would highly prefer if families did not pick up students to take them out to lunch, at least on a regular basis.
Thank you, Ms. Lippert. Ms. Flege, this one's for you. Can you explain why students need to be masked and 6 feet apart?
That is a great question. So what they have determined is that just normal speech and conversation, there are droplets that still come out in the air. So we do know that if people are 6 feet apart, that's not proven that that's enough. And depending on if somebody does cough or sneeze, or if they are yelling or singing or anything like that, laughing, then the droplets can go farther. So the 6 feet does offer some, but not a guarantee. It offers some protection, but not a guarantee. So what happens is, if you actually put that barrier there, that actually stops a lot of especially the bigger particles from escaping. So the smaller particles are the ones that are not going to go as far. So it's better to believe that the 6 feet is safe if you have that light level of covering to catch the bigger particles. So I hope that makes sense. If not, call me and we can talk about it.
It does. And Bill Cowher, former Pittsburgh coach, has to wear 2 masks when he talks. That was a relatively obscure football joke. Anyways, so this next one is for Lisa as well. For students who take daily medication, can they drop off their meds and permission form on the first day of school in the building, or is there a designated drop-off time and procedure?
Thank you for asking that question, because I would like to have everyone's medication and paperwork well before the school year. And there's 2 reasons for this. There are several steps that it takes for me to get those logged in and stored properly. I also need to set up appointments and make sure that the teacher knows which period they might need to visit the nurse's office for that medication. So because there's a lot of parts to that, I would love for everyone to contact me this next week, where we can get paperwork together. I can meet you outside the building. You can fax it, you can email it. As far as students bringing medications, you can bring it by the building. I'm there 8 to 4 every day, or last case, if you can't, then of course I would rather the student bring it in the first day than not have it. So please do what's best for you, but keep in mind that it's definitely on my mind that I want to be with the students who are there in the building and be attending to all the things that are going to be happening, because there will need a lot of support, even though there's fewer people. So if I can do that in advance, I'm happy. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, definitely reach out to Lisa if you have questions about that, and she can coordinate that. We know it's about 8 o'clock, but we have about 10 more questions, and I think we can get through those in a reasonable amount of time. So we're going to go ahead and do that. If you had a question that you didn't feel was adequately answered during this, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Ms. Lippert, or if it's a question for the nurse, please reach out to Ms. Flege, and we will make sure you get those questions answered. So this next one is for Ms. Lippert. For transition days next week, will school day hours be normal? That is a full day for those 2 transition days.
Correct. So the 2 transition days, again, you will only come when your track or your group comes. So Thursday or Friday will be our hybrid hours. So advisory will start at 8:10 and the school day will end at 3:20. So 8:10 to 3:20 is when they will be physically in class.
Yeah. This next one's for me. I'm concerned about my student being lost as they are trying to follow along with the assignments on Canvas. Teachers seem to use Canvas a bit differently. I'm even more concerned that the kids, especially 6th graders, are going to get lost during this transition. Please reassure me that the teachers are understanding and will be helpful and not punitive to kids. Yeah, this is certainly a great question. So I'll take the first part. For Canvas, a thing for parents to know is that there will be some differences from class to class in Canvas. But the expectation, there are 2 things that are expected in Canvas that should be consistent across all classes, and that are the best ways to get sort of down to, okay, how do I cut through all that and just find what I need? The first is modules. Modules are like folders in Canvas. Every assignment should go into a module, and the module should be organized by whatever the current unit is. So if every class has that modules tab, you can click on modules, and then within those modules should be every activity that needs to happen, including assignments. Also, teachers will be putting every assignment that needs to be completed outside of the school day will have a due date, and when it has a due date, it populates to the Canvas calendar. So that Canvas calendar should be comprehensive and should be a one-stop place for students to see what's coming up for assignments. If you do notice that a teacher has organized their Canvas calendar differently, or their Canvas course differently, and you're having a hard time navigating that, please reach out to them. And if you do have some concerns where you see that maybe a Canvas course isn't set up with those sort of fundamental things, that Canvas calendar and that module, please feel free to reach out to me or Ms. Lippert, and we'll make sure that those things are being followed as we continue to grow in our consistency with Canvas. Anybody who's come to Hastings as a 6th grader will tell you we concentrate on 3 things when kids come into the building. That's the 3 L's: lockers, lunch, and getting lost. But we don't have to cover lockers, so we have a ton more time to cover lunch and getting lost, which is good because those procedures are different. But we will have adults in the building on those transition days, especially for 6th graders. Our 7th and 8th grade staff will also be in the building. They'll be helping those students who are coming that are new, but then when they don't have students and it's not their planning period, they will be going and assisting other 6th grade classes to make sure there are a ton of adults around safely and physically distanced with their mask on, but making sure that students are getting a really good feel for where things are going. And with the one-way hallways, actually finding your way to and from class will be even easier. And keep in mind too, we usually do this and get up and running with our entire, half of our 6th grade, but then by day 3, we've got 720 students in the building, but we will only have those 300 students in the building. So our ability to support students and getting where they need to go is going to be a lot better because our student to teacher ratio throughout the building will be so much smaller. So that's one of the bright sides of this, is that we're going to be able to support kids and making sure they get where they're going. And the last thing about being flexible with our kids, we know that we've got a pretty good routine going on with enhanced distance learning, and we are building a whole new routine with hybrid. And so we know that grace needs to be given for everybody. We hope grace is coming our way, and we know that grace will be extended your way when it comes to getting these kids into these solid routines. So we'll build those routines with time, and we'll make sure that kids are taken care of. So this next one's for me. I heard the calendar function in Canvas doesn't always work properly. What can students do? The one thing that we are aware of with the Canvas calendar, some of those actually default to a different time zone. But other than that, and almost none of the assignments should be a time-bound thing. They should just be like an all-day assignment, and they should be sectioned differently in that calendar. It should be working correctly. If you are experiencing issues with the Canvas calendar, your student or you can reach out to us and we can help troubleshoot that. And then if we can't fix it, then we'll pass you along to Family Tech Help to get that fixed. The next one's from Megan. What will be the procedure for getting help from teachers during enrichment?
So with enrichment being an 80-minute block of time, we believe that that is plenty of time to get help from other teachers. So we are asking that students stay in the room, that they are scheduled in for enrichment, again, to reduce the number of transitions from class to class. But teachers are willing and able and ready to Zoom with students while they are in other classrooms. So different grade levels are doing different systems. Some grade levels are Zooming with students the whole time. And so they have students that they are monitoring in their classroom, but most of those students are Zooming with other teachers. We have some grade levels that are supporting their in-classroom students for the first 30 minutes with a little break, and then students in other classrooms for the last half of the class. So it'll be grade level dependent, but there is time and resources built into Zoom with students who may not be physically in the room, but they're in another teacher's room during that time.
Thank you. This next one's for me. What are the school hours and what time do buses come? So the school hours, we have adults ready to supervise students at 8 o'clock. Students are released to go to their advisory at 8:10. That's when the school day begins. That's 8:10. And then students are dismissed at 3:20. To find out what time your bus will come to pick you up, you should contact transportation. If you go to the transportation portion of our school website, you will see all the contact information for transportation, as well as some resources to getting that information. This one's for Megan. How will our sixth graders know where to go on that first day for orientation?
Yeah, so this is a hard one because a lot of our students haven't been in Hastings before, and we completely understand that there's a lot of anxiety about coming into the building for the first time and not knowing where their teacher's classroom is. So their first day of that sixth grade day, new student day, they will start at 8:10 in their advisory classroom. So again, I understand that they may not know physically where that is, but we will have our entire teaching staff out in the hallways, being able to answer questions. So if they can walk in day one, whether it's Thursday or Friday, with either the room number of their advisory or their teacher name, we will be able to have staff available to help them get to the right location.
Great. This one's for Lisa. If one of our children has a fever or other ill symptom, do we have to keep all of our kids home?
That's a really great question. I'm glad you asked that because there are so many of these little details that we'll probably have to find out along the way as we have more conversations, since tonight we can't discuss all of them, but thank you. If your student has a fever, then you definitely want to keep that student home. If you suspect that it could be COVID, it's really important to go ahead and call your doctor and see if they advise any testing. If your other children are well and have not been just demonstrating any symptoms, then we definitely want them to go ahead and come to school. If they display any symptoms, of course, we'll be in touch with you and we'll come up with a plan then. However, if you do have a family member who's COVID positive, confirmed in your household, then that means all of those children need to remain quarantined during the 14 days from their last contact with that family member. So we can talk more about that as the situation occurs, which we hope it doesn't. But yes, that student should stay away from the other siblings, but we do want the other siblings in school as long as they're well.
Thank you very much. This next one also for you, Ms. Legge. Why are you not checking temperatures as students enter the building? Will the honor system really work? I don't think they literally meant you as in, I think that's the collective you.
Yes, well, the collective you. So here's the thing. We do have a limited amount of people to check all the people in, and that would be very difficult to get everyone checked as they came in. So there would be a lot of queuing and lining up outside to get your temperature taken. So certainly that would be hard because we'd have to maybe then stagger start times a little bit, and it would just be logistically, if everyone is taking temperatures at doors, then who's in the classroom watching the kids? So it's really just more about that. We don't have any reason not to believe our parents. Certainly there are parents who will, like we lovingly say, drug and drop. So they might give Tylenol or ibuprofen and send their kid anyway. So someone may arrive and have already been medicated and still, demonstrate a temperature later in the day. So what we would like to do is to just appeal to everyone's best conscience to say, we want your child to be well and to be able to learn, and also to be able to continue in the hybrid model. The only way we can continue to keep this model and to move forward toward full 5 days is if everybody follows these protocols. So hopefully people will stick with it.
There are only.
Oh, Catherine, you're unmuted. Good to see you, Catherine, though. Good to hear from you. Sorry, I think that covered that question, Lisa. What I'm going to do, since it's 8:10, is I'm just going to rapid fire through these last maybe 6 questions that have come in, and then we'll go ahead and end our webinar for today. So this for students who are participating in sports, have practice or game after school, what's the procedure now for students in regards to where they would go to wait for their coach? We will be communicating that on a team-by-team basis. Ms. Logan Irwin, our athletic director, will be working with our coaches to make sure that those procedures are in place. So look for communication from your individual coaches. Is it mandatory for an IEP student to attend on the transition days? That's for 7th and 8th grade students on IEPs. Obviously, all 6th graders are expected to attend, but no, it is not mandatory for 7th and 8th grade students on IEPs to attend, but we wanted to provide that opportunity to help them get acclimated to the building. Where will I drop off my child at Hastings? If you are driving your child to school, you enter our parking lot and stop at the sign, let your child out, and then loop your way through the parking lot. And we will have a lot of supporting documentation to what we presented in our weekly update, our family flyer on Sunday. That will include some of those more routine procedures as well. But you just come in the entrance of our parking lot, drive up to the first sign that's available, stop, drop off your child, and then continue in the loop out. Will attendance be taken on remote learning days? Yes, attendance will be taken on remote learning days, but it's done per the state of Ohio's change to attendance policies to keep track of hybrid work days. Their attendance on remote learning days is actually based on their completion of the work that was assigned for that time outside of school. So we will be communicating more about that, but just make sure that to be counted as present over the long run for remote learning, students just need to be keeping up with their work. And again, we're going to make sure that is not a punitive thing that we're doing, but that in general, if students are making a good faith effort to complete their work and demonstrating that they're engaging and learning when they are at home, that they'll be counted as present. If we're in group 2 for the first week of hybrid learning, does that mean that those students will not have any assignments on those remote days, since they will not have any in-person learning? So for the first week, our transition week, we will set up some remote learning activities heading out of enhanced distance learning. And also during enhanced distance learning, teachers will be able to preview what they want those group 2 students to do on that Monday and Tuesday of our first full week of hybrid. So teachers will communicate that plan for what work needs to get done. And again, we will be flexible as we make this transition. Will students have the ability to message teachers when they are completing work on distance learning days? Will they have office hours for those students? So not formal office hours as in the synchronous office hour over Zoom for students who are at home, but teachers will be responding to email. Please know that, given the way that we're handling things, that those email may take a little longer than the next school day sometimes to be replied to, but we will try to stay up with student questions and email, as well as parent questions and email, as timely as we are able to do so. Last 2, how do you know if you're wearing a double layered mask? If you have any questions about your mask, feel free to reach out to our nurse and you can send a picture of it. and we'll let you know if it's a good mask. But I mean, if you use common sense and try to follow the best mask protocol that you can, we will work with that. And if we need to, we'll replace the mask and then get a different one for tomorrow. And last one, is there a point or case level that indicates that schools should go back to distance learning? So this is a good question. And as our superintendent has always said, we are in communication with Franklin County Public Health, and we are always following the governor's orders. Those specific criteria are always evolving as Franklin County Public Health sort of makes different recommendations. So there are certainly metrics that they are following, and you can look at those metrics in the governor's report and at Franklin County Public Health. But we will continue to assess the situation, and if it is no longer safe for us to be in hybrid as deemed by county health officials or state, then we would return to enhanced distance learning. We don't have a specific date for needing to do that now, but we are always monitoring this evolving situation to make sure we're making the healthiest choice that we possibly can. So it is 8:15. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. As soon as we stop and it has a chance to upload, this will also be available on YouTube. So if you have another family that you're aware of that wasn't able to attend tonight, they can watch this complete webinar, and everyone should now have access to our presentation. But please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for trusting us with your children. We take that very seriously, and we could not be more excited to have students in the building. Face-to-face learning is what we got into this business to do, and we are so excited that we have an environment that's safe enough to do it. And we couldn't be more thrilled for everybody here at Hastings Middle School to be welcoming your children back into the building. So thank you so much, and have a great evening.